First, we're going to just do a recap. We want to just let you know where we're at. We have one more week left of this, but we want to just talk about what we're talking about. What is this, if you're visiting or if you're new here or you just need to be reminded, what are we talking about in this series about relationships and what does it look like? We're talking about what it looks like for you and any relationship you're in to be more one together or to be in unity together. And so that's why we called our series Together, because we believe that two people together doing God's work do amazing things. And we talked a little bit about how this whole thing starts with you, okay? This is not about how you can learn how to change your spouse or your friend. This is about how you change yourself, and by changing yourself, you'll find your relationship strengthening immensely. But we also talked about how it's not totally about you. You can't make it about selfishness. You've got to realize that this is all about how you in your yard grow closer to Christ so that you come into a relationship with a healthy you, focused on who God is, and how you two can come together to become what God has called you to be. And of course, we talked about the yards and how you have a yard and she has a yard, or whoever the person is has a yard. And now we're going to talk about where we interact, this interactive cycle, this area where we called it the cozy garden. And everybody likes this safe space, this cozy garden, what it's like, what it looks like. It's the place where we imagined before we were married what marriage was like, right? I mean, we thought it was all about sex and how about this is going to be wonderful and we're going to get along forever and we're never going to fight. That's what we're talking about, this space. And all of a sudden, this space becomes what? It's like, hey, that wasn't exactly what I was thinking. Somehow you did something I didn't like. And all of a sudden, this area becomes more about arguing sometimes than it does about cozy garden. And we have this thing called the reactive cycle. And all of a sudden, we're starting to bump into each other. And when we bump into each other, stuff comes out of us. And we're like, where did that come from? So we blame it on our spouse or our friend, not realizing the stuff comes out of us is what's coming out of us. We're the ones that have the problem. And so we talked a little bit about that reactive cycle. And of course, we challenged you guys to go online and engage in that reactive cycle. Where is that at? That was at reactive...
It's reactivecycle.com.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we saw so many of you, we were overwhelmed by how many people had done it. And that's why we're mentioning it again. But the reactive cycle obviously just talks about your wants, what your triggers are, and then how you respond. And then, of course, we talked about how the thing separates, how it comes apart.
Yes. So after we talked about the reactive cycle, which I don't know if our slide's working or maybe not, because we put the reactive cycle, and I don't know if you guys remember or not, but there were these little breaks between when you got triggered and when you responded. And that's where we mentioned to you guys that you need to insert a care cycle. And last week we talked about the care cycle. Basically, it's a timeout that you take because you realize if I don't take a break, I am going to respond incorrectly. And so, again, think of it as like a timeout that you take. Taking care of your heart is fundamental to stopping the reactive cycle and for you to begin to communicate effectively with your spouse, with your friend, somebody that you are in a relationship. We are reminding you of the importance of the care cycle because tonight we are going to talk about work talk and heart talk. And communication will not be effective for you if you have not taken care of your own heart before you step into a conversation. So, a quick recap of the, so there's the reactive cycle, but now we're going to go to the care cycle. So the care cycle is 5 A's. 1, be aware of triggers and emotions. Then next you need to accept responsibility for those emotions and accept them as valuable information. Don't try to stuff them, don't try to ignore them, accept them. Then allow God into the conversation. Ask God for wisdom. Ask him to help you understand what is going on that caused you to feel that way. And understanding our emotions can be very complex. So when you invite God in, you allow God to come into it, you are saying that's the wisdom that I need to help me in this cycle. Then the next A was attend. And that was attend to our hearts by asking thought-provoking questions. And last week, we went into questions that you would ask. So if you didn't catch that, that would maybe be helpful for you to listen to that, because those are good questions that you ask yourself as you're trying to navigate what the emotions are you're feeling. And then the last one is act. Act on what we know to be true about ourselves, and then make adjustments as necessary. If you act in one way and you found, wow, that was not productive, then adjust and find a more productive way to act. So the care cycle basically helps us develop a plan of self-regulation when we feel threatened. It helps us establish a boundary or potentially set a new boundary. It helps us communicate to our spouse a plan for communicating well. And then also it helps us develop a plan so that we show up as a whole person, both physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. We are coming to the conversation not wounded and needy, but we are coming to the conversation in a more whole position. It's important to know that when you care for yourself, you actually benefit the conversation and you benefit the person that you are in a conversation with. So don't see the care cycle as something, again, selfish. See it as very important in navigating. Applying the care cycle is something that takes work. And so we wanted to give you some quick strategies on how would I begin to recognize and apply the care cycle. So the first thing would be understand patterns. Are there specific situations where you find yourself getting triggered and responding incorrectly? Are there topics that actually you find, as soon as we start talking about that topic, I feel triggered? Or maybe there's a certain person or a group of people or something about a person that you find that just triggers me. Ladies, I'm gonna be honest, maybe for you, it's that time of the month. And you need to recognize patterns and then use them to your benefit. How can I see these patterns and triggers, but then also that I will be more intentional about responding when I recognize these. Another thing is identify fear buttons. And that was why one of the reasons why we encouraged you guys to go to the reactivecycle.com, because then you can recognize, wow, this is actually how I feel. These are the fears. You'll begin to see what emotional vulnerabilities that you have. And when these buttons get triggered, you can identify them and then consciously and thoughtfully respond instead of react. Another thing would be to prioritize self-care. And if you're somebody who likes to go walking, go to the gym, eat prayer, maybe a game, you play games, just something that you're like, this is something that I need. Self-care, again, and we keep trying to reiterate that, is not to be selfish. It's not putting your wants ahead of the other person. It's saying that they are as important, and self-care is something that I need to make sure that I'm doing. And the next one would be empower personal autonomy. And we've talked a lot about this. Acknowledge that you have control over your own emotions and accept that responsibility. Even in a challenging situation, step back and say, this is me, and what do I need to do to take ownership? Because we've said this more than once, anytime we view our spouse as both the problem and the solution, we give them all the power to make things better or worse in our life. So we don't want that to happen to you guys. We want to empower you to make intentional decisions when you are thinking about a care cycle. So
yeah, for sure.
I think we have a couple more.
The last two would be this. Couples, we want you in a relationship to not think of a win-lose argument, like I'm going to lose the argument or I'm going to win the argument. You need to be thinking about, in your relationship, how to have a win-win scenario. Now, how do we both win in this discussion of this topic? How do we think like this? We both want to win. We don't want to have a winner and a loser. I promise you, if you have a loser, you're going to have some tension. There's going to be some fallout from the idea of winners and losers. Now, I hate that because I always love winning arguments. I mean, why have an argument unless you're trying to win, right? Right? I mean, that's what we want to do. But when we're trying to communicate, winning and losing is not really a great option. It's not a way to think about things. The other thing is you're going to have to establish effective communication styles, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. What are some of the ways in which you can effectively communicate? So oftentimes in our relationship, If I want to take advantage of the situation and win, I know the way in which I can communicate to derail the entire relationship conversation. And I know that if you're like me, you know the same things. You know the buttons that you can push that your wife has, or your husband has, or your friend has, to kind of railroad the entire conversation. And so we're going to talk about what it means to establish communication. But these things lead into these two topics we want to talk about today, and that is this: what is a heart talk, and what is a work talk? Heart talk is a communication that is all about expressing emotions or getting to know your spouse for who they are, not to win an argument. They focus on an emotional connection. They are about a place where you can express your feelings openly, share your emotions with empathy, be vulnerable. This place where you say, hey, listen, I don't necessarily agree with you, but I'm willing to take a moment of time and actually get to know what makes you tick and why it happens. And then work talk. What is work talk? Work is where we actually get work done. We solve problems. We focus on problem solving. We're taking practical steps to fulfill our dreams and do things that we want to do. And this is what normally happens, okay? This is what happens. We start in a work talk conversation, and then someone's buttons get pushed, and then their feelings get drawn in, and then we're arguing about a work talk conversation, but now it's about feelings and emotions and not about getting anything done. So what do? We're in this rapid argument that has nothing to do with work, but all has to do with feelings. And so oftentimes couples can't solve problems, get stuck in a reactive cycle environment because they can't separate. There's something greater happening here. There's a feeling that we need to deal with feelings in a feeling conversation, and we need to deal with work in a work conversation. And I believe that's one of the biggest things to not actually being able to reconcile differences and problems. It's what gets in the way of us actually accomplishing what God would have us to do. This struggle with communications are long-standing for most couples because most people talk over each other. So when we start talking about heart talk and we start talking about work talk, we're going to start talking about how you actually have a conversation where both people are not talking at the same time. A place where you, the talker, can be heard, you can feel safe, you can be understood, you can be cared for. So let's dive into this idea of heart talk. First of all, let me tell you something. Heart talk is the worst thing in all the world.
Don't be so encouraging.
Hate heart talk. I hate heart talk. Heart talk is where you actually have to have a reason why you have an emotion. And I just want to have emotions. I don't want to have a reason, or I don't want to dig deep enough to find out why I even have it. And then I certainly don't want to tell someone about it. Anybody feeling for me? That's the way I feel. And so that's the idea. These heart talks are all about understanding each other. And the reason why couples don't grow in their relationship is because they're not willing to actually dive into what really makes you think the way you did. When we just went to this conference, the gentleman says, hey, have you ever had a heart talk? And I said, what are you talking about? And then he described what I just said. And I said, who would do that on purpose? And he says, oh, this is good. And he made us do a heart talk. And he says, doesn't that feel good? I said, no. But the reality was, it was a part of me that was able to share something that my wife had never heard or never even thought that I had those thoughts. And all of a sudden, it's like, wow, that makes so much sense. And so that's what heart talks are going to be all about.
Yeah. I remember when we came back, he said, I realize that at work, at times, we're in a heart talk and other people are in a work talk.
Yeah.
And so even as we share this with you, we hope that you will use this in your marriage and in friendships, but also recognize, even in work situations, this information can be valuable. So a heart talk is a conversation that is, again, relationally oriented, not problem-solving oriented. It's a conversation where we can care, understand, and connect. It's a conversation about feelings, fears, and wants. If you are able to communicate that in a clear, concise way, you will create understanding in a relationship. And that is an ultimate goal, is does the other person understand me? Knowing and being known are a very important part of a heart talk. And the reason I say being known is because it's a time that you're being vulnerable. So that's an important part of heart talk, that you are realizing and risking that as well. And I guess another really important part that I should say about when you're vulnerable is you're not going to be vulnerable if you do not feel safe. And we talked one week about how important safety is. And so I'm just going to kind of do a little bit of recap on that, because men and women both, if they do not feel safe, if they don't feel secure, they will not be vulnerable, they will not be open, they will not be honest, and your heart talk will have no traction. So let's lay some groundwork. If we talk about how do we have a positive conversation, because we want to have these heart talks, how can we lay some groundwork? And so one thing to think about before you even begin is, what do I do or not do that makes my spouse feel safe in our marriage? What do I do or not do that makes me feel safe in our marriage? And then the third one would be, what can I do that will make my marriage safe for both my spouse and me? So those are good questions to ask yourself, because again, if you don't have that safety, you won't have the vulnerability. And we spoke about that in value and vulnerability. So that's a very important thing to remember. So then there's two rules that we're going to kind of say to think about for safe conversation. And one is really listen. I'm awful about this. I'm confessing it, honey. Really listen. We get talking, and I just want to say everything that I have to say, and I really don't want to listen. So this one's very good for me, because some of the key points are: don't talk over each other, don't rush to defend yourself, don't listen with distractions through the TV, or pick up your phone and check the social media or a text that pinged through when you're talking. Don't review the Rolodex of past mistakes, past or present mistakes. Nobody wants to hear that. It's not productive. You are trying to just take the moment and not factor in all the mistakes they've made in the past. That's not helpful. Don't laugh at the other's feelings, and don't finish the other's sentences. Okay, so when we talk about really listen, those are some of the things we mean. Another thing is choose the right setting, and that's important. Before you get into a conversation, talk about these things. Talk about how are we going to set ourselves up for successful conversation. So factors. What factors would make you feel comfortable in having a conversation? Where would you feel that you could have, what would be the best scenario for having a good, productive conversation? What setting is the best? Over dinner, at lunchtime, out on a walk, on a long drive. One couple even, they would go to the library. They picked a night. They said, we're going to go for 2 hours, and we're going to go to the library. They were both very angry, volatile people. And so they said, if we have to go to the library, then we won't yell at each other, because we'll have people all around us, and we'll have to be quiet. So I don't know if maybe that would describe you, but if you need something like that, accountability, go to the library for what kind of place you need. What time of the day? Are you a morning person? Can you have good conversation in the morning, in the evening, over lunch? Talk about what time of day you guys could have a good conversation. How long? Is this going to be 10 minutes, or is this like, wow, we really need to resolve some things, and this is going to be a 2-hour conversation, and we really need to be intentional and set aside time to have this conversation. Also, maybe a conversation started out short and it gets a little longer. So be able to stop for a minute and say, you know what, this conversation has been going on a long time. Do we need to take a pause and maybe reconvene? That's important to remember as you are thinking about how you set yourself up for success. And then recognize that it's okay to have differing opinions. And we talked about a win-win, so we're not talking about the fact that we don't want winners and losers. But there's going to be times that it's not about coming to a solution. It's just going to be about, I see things differently than you do. And you don't have to judge the other person for feeling the way they do. You just can recognize and say, I'm not going to judge you. it's going to be safe for you to have your own opinion as well. So always remember, you can't make someone trust you. What you have to do is be a trustworthy person. And that then begins to instill trust in the person and in the conversation as you're trying to create safety.
Yeah. Remember, heart talks are going to take time. One of the things that most couples are unwilling to do, or even in relationships, or people aren't willing to do, is they're really not willing to invest in the time that a heart talk even is. They think that it should just happen, or the relationship should just work, or our spouse will just figure it out. If you want to really grasp the reality of what it takes to get to know someone, it's going to take a lot of time. It's going to take some skill. We're going to talk a little bit about how to do it. We feel like that they taught us. It's going to take some difficult time and some skill. It's going to take some attitude of willingness to be understood and actually be able to talk in such a way that you don't get angry. You're trying to be understood. You're going to have to be intentional. You're going to have a conversation on purpose. These are all words you really don't want to hear because probably half of your conversations just happen out of reaction. They're not planned out. They're not thought out in any way. We must remember that our relationships, we can influence and impact our mate's thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and beliefs, but we cannot determine or change them. I want to say that again. You can influence and you can impact your partner, your friend, your spouse's thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and beliefs, but you cannot change them. I can't tell you my wife has been trying to change me it's going on 36 years now. And she has a big F in change. That's because it doesn't happen. But I will know this, that she does have influence that does pour into me that then I say, you know what, I really need to change. And when I decide to change, then change happens because it's in my yard, it's my life, it's what I'm bringing to the cozy garden.
Wait, I need to interrupt because I will have conversations and I'm trying to influence him. And in the moment, he is saying all the reasons why that's not good, doesn't work, and everything else like that. And then like a week or two later, I'm like, he did listen to me and he's doing that, but he will never admit it in the moment.
Take note.
It's so frustrating though when that happens.
Well, never mind.
Nobody's going to admit?
No, we're not going there.
Hey, I also have to give him kudos because the other day we got into a discussion. I don't know if it's the one that you were referring to, but I finally was like, all my buttons had been pushed. I was triggered. I was just like, I don't even want to have the conversation anymore. It's done. I don't want to have the conversation. Like, just stop. And he was like, no, I really want to understand. And I actually was like, he is practicing this. So I just have to give him props because he drew me back into the conversation, told me how I was acting wasn't acceptable. And I'm like, why do you have to trigger me?
Wait, we got to get through 31 pages. No, just joking. It is funny how even when you don't practice all that we've given you, because obviously you're drinking through a fire hose, some of the statements will slowly start to tick in and you're like, oh, that's what I was supposed to do. Yeah.
That's what we're hoping.
And we're going to have another opportunity to make up for that, so trust me. Why is a heart talk so important? We must take the time to know each other without trying to change them. Okay? The key to heart talk is I'm going to take time to have a conversation to understand my wife, and I'm not going to say, but if you would just do this, I can solve the problem. I'm not trying to change. I'm only trying to listen and understand. A perspective, a different way of thinking. If you didn't realize this, wives and husbands just have a different way of thinking. Also, understand this, heart talks require this, a healthy dose of honor of your spouse or your friend. If you don't honor them, if you don't truly value them as a person, that God has created them, they have been put in your life, you value who they are, you're going to struggle. This is a fundamental way of understanding before we get into this idea of heart talk. They are valuable, their feelings matter, they are worth your time. They are worth your time. Just so you know, if you're planning on staying married for 70 years, it's good to spend the time early And often, instead of waiting till you're 30 years into marriage when you finally realize, hey, we're not solving this problem. I'm always amazed. My story, my testimony, if you remember, the couple that adopted me, they got divorced after 32 years of marriage, after they had 5 grown children. And you're like, what in the world? I thought by 32 you're done. And then I made it to 35 and realized that's not the case at all. And so we want you to understand this idea. And this requires each spouse to deny themselves, to ask God into the conversation, and to truly desire to listen and to learn. And I think that's priceless. When you view your spouse or your friend as a priceless gift, you're granting them a position worthy, again, of the conversation. And the highest level of love, of maturity, is when both husband and wife value the other's feelings and needs much greater than their own. Yeah. So heart talk, asking God to help you see your mate as he sees them and not necessarily from a selfish motive or a selfish place. So the idea of heart talk is going to wrap around this idea of ICU. We want to say that heart talk is the ICU of a relationship. It's where there's going to be a lot of care. There's going to be a lot of attention. There's going to be a lot of focus where your life can be transformed by understanding your partner's life. This conversation is where we promote value of vulnerability, again, in our relationships. Statements like, I value you and I'm willing to be vulnerable with you. This leads to healthy oneness, again, and truly, it's where intimacy is really developed. And I'm telling you, out of the majority or the vast majority of our counseling, most people quantify intimacy as sex, and they're missing the entire idea of intimacy. This idea that we are intimately in relationship and in caring for one another, that we both know our roles and what we're doing. Heart talk requires 2 roles, and you need to write these down. You're either a speaker or you are a listener. A speaker or a listener. Oftentimes, when we're in heart talk, we're fighting over who's the listener and the speaker. Okay, we're going to kind of get into this. In other words, we're in the middle of, hey, I want to share my heart, and they start talking, and then we start interrupting. And then we start stealing the speaker position. And so you need to understand there is a speaker and a listener. When the speaker when you have identified a speaker, like, hey, honey, I want to be the speaker, her job is to give me the floor or give the other person the floor, this objective. And so what are we trying to do in ICU? We're trying to identify the speaker's heart message. Hey, I want to be the speaker, and I'm going to share with you my heart. I'm going to share with you about who I am. Not only that, the C stands for I want to care about the speaker's heart. If I'm the listener, I'm caring about what they're saying, I'm interested in what they're saying, and the speaker is also trying to articulate his emotions about a specific topic. And you seek to understand the speaker's feelings. If you don't want to know the person's feelings, if you're like I was, which is, I tend to be, which is, I don't really care about how you feel, I just want to solve the problem, right? I mean, what do feelings have to do with it when I can just, do ABC and solve this problem and we can be done and we can go play? But that's not really what's going to help the relationship at all. So these 3 objectives, the ICU, the identify, the message, care about the speaker's heart while they're sharing it, and seek to understand their feelings, is what we're going to kind of break into a little bit. This is very important.
And we gave you guys a handout.
Oh, yes,
when you guys
we did.
came in, we just went ahead and printed that so that you guys could kind of see what that is. So when you get that, you'll maybe then be able to notice the IC and the U.
Yeah.
So.
Yep.
Okay. So the speaker's goal is to be understood, and the listener's goal is to understand and care. So if I'm the speaker, I want to be understood. That's my goal. I'm trying to communicate so that he understands, and his goal is to just understand and care. So this here is one way, like we are hunting for our good old, really good flashlight. But this is a good visual for you to use, because the idea is, if Ron is the person who has the floor and he is the speaker, visually what I can be doing is I'm shining the flashlight on his heart. And that is a reminder to me that all I'm doing is caring about him. Now, the other day, we did not have a flashlight out, but I was having a conversation, and I'm sharing, and all of a sudden, I was like, you know what you just did? You just took the flashlight and went like this, and you shined it on your own heart, and now this whole conversation is about you and how awful I am. And so it was just like one of those moments, like, wait, you don't
I didn't even know we were in a heart talk.
you don't get to steal the flashlight from the other person. And so anyhow, a flashlight can be just like a visual. You don't have to have a big old hunkin' thing, but it's just kind of a visual, and it reminds you, he's the person who's talking. My goal is to shine the flashlight on his heart to understand what he has to say. So when you want to have a heart talk, these are some very important things to remember to set yourself up, again, for success. And one is ask for time. Okay, that's important. Would you be willing to have a heart talk? Or is now a time for me to share something from my heart? Listen, it's reckless of you to not ask if that person is ready for you to have a heart talk. Because listen, they might say yes, but they might say no. They might say wait until later. They might say I need a care cycle before I have a conversation about that. They might just say, hey, I need to unwind from work. And if you are not ready to hear something other than yes, you are not ready to have a heart talk, okay? Deep conversation means both people need to be prepared and be willing so that you set yourself up for success. Another thing that is important is as the speaker, okay? Again, the heart is shining on you, you're the speaker, you're sharing. The way you want to have communication is to start out and say, I feel this when X happened. Or I fear when this happened. Or another one is, I long for in this situation. The idea then is the listener is not caught on what happened, but they're caught on what you said, how you felt, a fear, or something that you longed for. And that can be the focus versus on what the event was. So that's important for you to remember as the speaker, starting out with that. I feel, I fear, or I long for are good ways for you to think, how do I share this with my spouse? And you also are really trying hard not to say, I feel when you do, okay? Because then what you're doing is you're blaming them. And so you're trying not to do that. You're just trying to share how you feel, fear, or what you long for in certain situations or events, something along those lines. Another important thing when you want to have a heart talk is you want to seek to be understood, not change the other person. So that one has been the hardest for me, because when I want to share something with him, it is because I want him to change. I want him to change his ways and see it my way and respond differently or something like that. And so, complete confession, this is the hardest one for me, because if our goal is to get our spouse to see things our way, to complain, criticize, correct, condemn, or hopefully to change them, then we're really not in a good place for a heart talk. And again, that one's been really challenging for me, is we want to be understood, but we're not trying to get that other person to change. Another thing that will set you up for success in a heart talk is to talk about what you want to talk about. So if you have a hard topic, say to your spouse, I'm going to give you an example. As I consider having a heart talk about finances, I'm afraid my fear button will get pushed and I'll respond out of my insecurities. So that's an example. Like, you're trying to say, listen, I want to talk about this, but I know this is a hard conversation for me to have. And I know what typically happens is this is the way I'd respond. So it's okay to talk about how you will talk about what you're trying to talk about. Another thing is have heart talks about positive emotions. It doesn't always have to be about negative emotions. And I think we tend to think, well, it's easy to talk about all the good things, why do I need to talk about them? But expressing gratitude, appreciation, and encouragement are just as important as painful emotions, especially when you can share it with your spouse and you're giving it in an encouraging way. So something that would be good, in what they recommended for us, was have positive heart conversations once a day. Take 10 minutes and share something positive. And let that person hear what you value about them. It encourages them. They can then say, I didn't realize how important that was, or something like that. Just have a good dialogue of positive conversation. So remember, it's good to have a positive heart conversation, not just all the negatives. Communication focuses on the speaker until the speaker feels understood. And that's important to remember, because it's not about when the listener thinks they understand. Okay, it's not when Ron's like, I think I understand you. No, he would repeat back, this is what I think I hear you saying. And once he then repeats it, if I'm like, yes, you understand, then I feel understood, and that's when the communication has happened. So that's an important thing to remember, is when you as the speaker feel that you have been understood, that has been a successful heart talk. And then listening and caring is not the same as agreeing. Your feelings matter to me. I value sharing your heart, that you shared your heart. Knowing how you feel about this helps me understand you. That's a positive thing. Nowhere in there was him saying, and I agree with how you feel, because a lot of times he doesn't agree. And that's okay. He does not have to agree. You do not have to agree with how the person feels. And I say this cautiously, but often don't say, I understand, because truth is probably you really don't understand, so don't use that line. Just be able to say that, that I appreciate, I hear you, but you don't have to agree. So we're not trying to get you guys to be like, well, I'm just going to lie about this. No, don't lie when there's a heart talk. Just realize all you're trying to do is understand and care, not have to agree.
Yeah. I think one of the things that's hard for me is the next one, and that is use slow, soft, manageable sound bites. I have a tendency to talk loud and fast, and I'm covering so much ground, I oftentimes lose her in the weeds. And so speak slowly, speak calmly, keep the volume low, which is almost impossible for me to do. Keep a gentle tone. I see why you gave this section to me. Because you want the listener to summarize your feelings. I'm telling you, you know how hard that is? It's painful. Because we just want an answer. But the truth is, if we're in this conversation to actually gain information, talking slow and being intentional and actually trying to learn and listen is going to require you to take sound bites. As a listener, you often have to offer summaries as the conversation's going. Don't allow the speaker to talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, and there's just more information than you can actually regurgitate back that you actually even understood. So make sure the sound bite is, hey, so what I'm hearing you say this, or it seems like you feel disrespected when, or I think I hear you feeling lonely, and am I hearing that correctly? In other words, you're interactive. This is not just the speaker speaks and the listener just listens without getting into that conversation of affirming and listening as she's speaking or as they're speaking, because the person will feel oftentimes at the end of a long rambling conversation, did you get all that? And the answer is no. And so you don't want to go there either. Saying things like, I wonder if you feel like this because of that, or you're very curious. I'm curious if these two things are related. One of the things, we had a conversation the other day, and I just said, honey, I think that this thing you're arguing about over here really is directly connected to this. Is there any way that these two things are connected, and you're really missing what you're struggling with in this situation? And we just talked a little bit about that idea. You see, validation can be very powerful, and only offering an apology once the speaker feels understood is probably a better opportunity. Don't apologize or say you're sorry or I'm sorry you feel that way without fully understanding what's happening. What you are saying makes a lot of sense. These are the kinds of things you're saying. Your feelings are important to me. I'm sorry I had a part in this. Like, I'm sorry that I was a reason why you felt this way. I'm sorry I was wrong. These things you want to do as you're starting to you feeling as though you're understanding where the person is coming from, and you're not jumping to it. I'm a quick guy. This is my way. You have a problem with what I said? Hey, I'm so sorry. Now we can just be done with that. Right? I don't really want to know the details. I just want to say I'm sorry and get that off the shelf so I don't have to get into the emotions. And that's not helpful at all, because the truth is I never did listen to what she was really struggling with. Having a heart talk about your heart talk, like we were talking earlier, is also sometimes necessary. You want to be able to make the conversation easy, and so you want to be able to say, hey, what's going to be hard about this conversation we're about to have? What are some of your fears? What are you thinking about this heart talk? What is going to be uncomfortable? How can we make adjustments in how we talk to each other right here? For me, I have to watch where I'm doing. So I have body language problems. I'm sure none of you do. And so if I'm not paying attention of where I'm sitting, how I'm sitting, if the television is anywhere near me and it's on, that's like the death sentence of I am ignoring everything she says, because after I start zoning out like this is getting really boring, that commercial looks wonderful. And so those kind of things are very, very, very important. In a nutshell, heart talk is when one of you talks about something that's on your heart while the other listens and tries to understand and acknowledges that they grasp the magnitude of the person's feelings. And I'm telling you that heart talk, when it starts to become like this, brings unity. It is going to bring the very things that you are desiring. Again, one is the speaker, one is the listener. Your goal is to actually understand. Now, the way the heart talk works is this. If you have time and you've had a heart talk and you've been able to communicate back to the person, this is what I hear you say, and they're like, yes, that's exactly how I feel. It's more than okay to say, can now I be the speaker and let me share you a little bit about my feelings about the situation, and then take the flashlight and say, great, you can now have a heart talk, but not until the other person feels completely understood. This is what heart talk is all about. It's probably, I believe, one of the hardest things, if not the one thing that is not happening in 99% of all relationships. It's not happening. People are getting heart talk through distracted work talk / arguments / you're getting to know their feelings through rage, upsetness, anger. You're learning it that way. And again, a lot of times it's not even the thing you're arguing about that they're struggling with. It's something much deeper. So couples, if you would consider that, I think it will challenge and transform the way you communicate. Now, one of the things we have, honey, is we do not have the clock on the wall. Do you know what time it is?
7:53.
7:53.
Work talk.
Excuse me. So, once you have heart talk, once you have been able to share your feelings, once you are understood, once you know how the person on the other side actually is processing what it is inside their head that you're having a hard time figuring out, now you can have this thing called work talk. Work talk is when we actually get something done, and I like work talk and I hate heart talk. But again, work talk works much better when we have heart talk. Work talk is when we use reason and logic and experience to overcome our challenges. We use strategies of vision to talk about our future. In other words, work talk is when we get together in the cozy garden and we talk about our hopes, dreams, and desires as a couple and what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. Now, all of a sudden, because I know her feelings and I know who she is as a person, it derives and directs the way in which I communicate about a vision or a direction that I feel the family needs to go. Or she might say that parenting needs to go, or whatever that looks like. Work talk is task-oriented. It's about doing. Couples are discussing these things together. And again, they're not trying to mix work talk and heart talk at the same time.
A couple key things about work talk is it's facts and reasoning. It's not the emotion behind it. So that's a real big facts.
Yeah.
Factual. So keep going.
Yeah, it's about winning. It's about the win-win relationship. It's about how do we do things and do life together. How many couples do you know that are been married for a long time, but they're doing life separate? They're not even doing life together because they never actually have a work talk because they've never had a heart talk to actually know where they're going in the first place. And that's what this is all about. The moment you and your spouse square off as adversaries, I want you to know that you are finished. You're finished. Once it becomes my word or your word against me or I don't like, the conversation normally goes south. The only real adversary, by the way, in your marriage is the one who wants to destroy the very marriage that it is. And we know that from the garden, obviously, in Genesis. And we'll be talking about that in our next series. That's my jam for ladies, is just who is your enemy? And Satan has a way of destroying us because he stops intimate conversations and he also stops dreams and aspirations because selfishness plays into it. Mark 3:25 says this, if a house is divided against itself, that house will not be able to stand. It's not going to stand. If you and your husband or you and your wife are doing your own thing and talking and just cohabitating, I just want you to know your house is not standing. The structure may be there, but there is no foundation. There is no long-lasting thing happening. You are a team fighting against a single opponent who is trying to destroy what God is trying to put together. When teammates fight, they become adversaries. As teammates, when you win together, guess what? You win together. When you lose together, you lose together. There is no, hey, because of you, this happened. This is not what it means to be one together. Good marriage partners aren't combatants. They are teammates with a common goal to accomplish many, many things. I'm going to let you go from there.
Okay.
Because I'm trying to talk fast.
Okay. Overall, there has to be a commitment to operate with love and respect. Even when your buttons get triggered, if you have to step back, take a care cycle, you're trying to say, I want to operate with love and respect. So we want to tell you, how do you have some win-win solutions in a work talk? Okay, you want to have a work talk, how can you have that win-win solution? So first thing is adopt a no-loser policy. Like, you're a team. If you're on a team and there's like 5 players on a basketball team, at the end of the game, those 5 players all won or those 5 players all lost. There can't be a player that's like, oh, I won. No, you're on this team and our team did not score as many points as that team. So that's what you need to think about in your marriage. You're a team and you can't have somebody who is like, I won, and the other person's like, I lost. That you just make that a decision. You have a no-loser policy. If you need to, heart talk the issue. Okay? This helps you connect and understand how the person is feeling. So if you have to step back and say, we're not being productive in this work talk, step back and have a heart talk. Pray for unity, okay? You don't overcome situations if you don't come together in unity. So pray together and ask God for unity to be restored, because then right there in the fact that you came together to pray about it, unity has been established. So even though you started out this way, he started out this way, when you come together and pray, it's like, no, we've got unity in this because we've asked God, we've invited him into this conversation, and we're united in the fact that we want to solve this with God's help. So that creates unity right there. Brainstorm about options. Get out a piece of paper, write down. Nothing is going to get judged. Just what are some solutions? Write it down. Don't make fun of the other person's thoughts, ideas. Just write them down and say, what could all our possible options be? Then evaluate the options and find the one that you both feel good about. Cross off the ones like, this is not a win, this might be a win for you, but it's not a win for you. Cross it off. You're looking for the win-win, so the goal is to find a solution that honors both husband and wife, both friends, whatever the situation is. Try it or wait. The idea would be, if we can come to agreement, let's decide on a period of time. If you can't agree on it, say, let's step back and work through steps 1 through 4 again. We're not gonna, if we can't win, we're gonna step back and we're gonna work through these steps again. Be patient. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's God's timing is not your timing. So maybe you need to look and say, maybe we need to wait about this. Maybe each person needs to go through a care cycle again. And I know we keep inserting that, but you will find that that is going to help you a lot of times if you can't resolve something, that you step back and say, maybe we can't resolve it because I need a care cycle. Revisit and rework. When you talk about a win-win, say, hey, maybe we need to look at this in 6 weeks, 6 months, a year. Is it working for us? If it's not, what do we need to change and evaluate so that we can come up with something better?
Yeah, Misunderstandings, the differences between each of you are going to be part of a big part of your heart talk and your work talk. This idea of healthy communication in marriage involves respecting our differences and honoring each and every one of us in the conversation. And so when we think about the last thing you fought about or what your discussions are about. What does it look like for you to honor each other's differences? What does that mean to do or to look like? Are you actively listening? Are you participating in listening to the other person, or have you just discounted everything completely altogether? Listening without interrupting is one of the hardest things that I do. I don't let my wife finish a sentence, or I think I'm thinking of the answer while she's talking. I don't have active listening involved. Proverbs 18:13 says this: if one gives an answer before he hears, it is his folly and shame. Nothing like the Bible literally quoting what you do wrong every single day, Ron. It's kind of embarrassing, but that is so true. Oftentimes we're formulating our argument before we've even heard what the other person has to say. This active listening fosters empathy, a better understanding on how to give a full attention to your partner. You need to understand that you have to maintain eye contact. Make sure you're nodding, you're paying attention, you're avoiding interrupting. You're paraphrasing, again, like we said, to ensure clarity, even in a work talk. So this is what I think that you think about this situation. Demonstrate that you value their feelings while you're in the process. You don't have to have a heart talk to say, hey, listen, I can tell you're really passionate about this, or why is this feeling getting worked up inside of you? The second thing is this: self-reflection. I am really bad at this as well. That's why I'm really good at listening to her talk and then arguing the entire time, and then after the conversation, go, wow, let me just process that. I think she was really right, and maybe I'll just sneak these changes in and she won't notice. Normally she does. But the idea of self-reflection in an argument or in a conversation or in a work talk is fundamental. The other one is emotionally awareness. Are you emotionally aware? Are you an adult in the room when you're in a conversation? My son would tell me this all the time: Dad, you have no emotional awareness. Like, you literally do not care or do not pay attention to the emotions that the other person is communicating while you're talking, because you really don't care about their emotions. You just want to get something done. Emotional awareness matters. The truth is this: I would get more done by being more emotionally aware in this situation, and reckoning emotions matter. Be aware of your emotions as well, because I have the same problem. My emotions start to go through the roof. And the question is, am I starting to feel defensive? Am I being anxious? Am I lacking empathy? Am I starting to realize that my emotions are getting away, and I'm not observing their emotions as well? Of course, number 4, biblically speaking, choose your words wisely. Couples in the room, I'm telling you right now, what people tell each other today is mind-blowing just for me. And I know I'm only 55, but when I hear of how couples or people talk to each other and the language that is used, it is overwhelming. Words matter. That's why the Bible says we'll be accountable for every word we say. So use your words wisely. Use positive language. When you find yourself frustrated, throwing them under the bus or saying harsh things about whatever is not helping your situation, is not going to make the situation better. Cursing, name-calling, cutting language, you're worthless, or you've never, or, it can get as personal as you can imagine, so don't do that. Clarity is always important, okay? Just nice, simple, clear words. The fewer, the better. Using I statements is another big one. Express your feelings with I instead of you. Avoid your action, if you would, and make it yourself. Find common ground. Focus on shared goals. Find common ground in an argument. What is it that they are saying that you can agree with? Let's talk about that. I have a tendency with that. I just assume the agreement is all normal. That's like, yeah, we already agree on that. Let's talk about what we disagree on. But what I'm finding is that when I start to emphasize what we agree on before I know what the things we disagree on, really are not that relevant. 7, seek solutions. Brainstorm together. Pay attention to nonverbal signals. These are kinds of things that we want you guys to think about when it comes to communication.
Yeah, because remember we told you guys that only 7% of communication is actually what comes out of your mouth. The other 93% is all your tone and body language and everything. So I have to say one funny thing is because if you are a person who is not a verbal processor, you do not think as quickly as the other person is speaking. And so that's what happens to me. I am like, I can't even, he is just talking so fast and I'm like, I don't even know what to say. And so anyhow, that is why when we're talking about some of these things, if you need to, just say, I need to take a break. I need to process everything that you've said. So conflict resolution is another important part of communication. Stay calm and respectful. Don't let your emotions escalate. We keep reminding you, if you need to, take a step back, take a time and say, could I please have a care cycle? I find that I am going to end up being loud, obnoxious, and disrespectful if I don't take a step back. Practice assertiveness. Express your needs clearly. Your spouse is not a mind reader.
Amen.
Yes, I know. Thank you, honey.
I wasn't talking to you, honey. I was talking for all the men out there.
Okay. Express your needs. Be clear and concise. Don't have passive-aggressive behavior. That's important. Accept feedback. Feedback is important in a relationship, and provide feedback so that the other person can grow and learn from a situation. If you get defensive, ask yourself why. That's on you if you got defensive when you have asked for feedback and you didn't get what you thought you wanted to hear. Agree to disagree. That's an important part of good communication is, again, as we've said, you don't always have to agree. Have role models. I like to read books, listen to podcasts. I do all of that kind of thing just to try, how can I have better conversation? How can I have a better mindset? So have people, and maybe even just people in your life or resources in your life so that you learn to communicate better. Empathize and validate. Put yourself in the other person's shoes. That's a very important part of communication. Seek to understand their feelings and then validate. Say things like, that must be challenging to feel the way you do, or it must be tough to experience what you are going through. I can see why you would feel the way you would. So it's important to empathize and validate the other person. So those are just some good communication strategies that we hope that we can share with you this week. Effective communication, as Ron said in the very beginning, it's a skill. It is not something that has happened. And going to Hope Restored was very eye-opening for me in how we have not had good communication skills. But I'm also going to say, I don't think we needed good communication skills until recently we started. And I halfway wonder, like, did the Lord have to put us through all of that so that we would have a better appreciation to be able to share different information and understand maybe what more people go through? I don't know. But we are wanting to give you guys good communication skills because we know that that makes a marriage, a big difference in your marriage, whether you can communicate. So hopefully you will have heard heart talk, work talk, understanding how the care cycle works to prepare you to get into a conversation, and that would be something that is beneficial to you. The last thing we just want to remind everybody about is our Prepare Enrich. If you are in your marriage and you are just really like, we just need more resources, and we are realizing that. Our church has Prepare Enrich. It's a great resource. You can email us at marriage@mountaincity.church. Yeah, mountaincity.church, sorry. And they will reach out to you and tell you more about Prepare Enrich. So we just want to keep that little plug in your ear as far as what resources that we have that are beneficial to you to try to help you. Because we know that if there's strong marriages, we have strong families, we have strong churches, we have a strong community. And we certainly need that. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that just again, in closing tonight, we want to thank you for being here. We also realize this, and this is one of the things the two of us have really, it's easy to have heart talks and work talks about easy subjects, but it's difficult to have heart talks and work talks where the tension really is rising. And what normally happens is you start to drift into the defense normally for conservatives are, I'm the leader, I'm the husband, we're doing it my way. And you can play that trump card all you want, and good luck with that. Sometimes that works. Sometimes your wife is fine. She can submit to that, and it works. The vast majority of the time, though, I would say it doesn't, because the truth is this: if we're great leaders, men, if we're great leaders, then we make sure that somebody is behind us wanting to follow. Remember, leadership means that you actually have influence, not just position. Okay? Leadership is not positional, it's influential. And so as you find yourself dealing with roles and some of these tough challenges, remember this: if you're the leader that you think you are, then you have the influence because of the way in which you communicate to move your spouse along with you. And so I would just encourage you, as we get ready for our last one, it's going to be really good. We're going to talk a little bit about love and what that looks like and how that plays a huge role in all this. We have 6 things we're going to talk about to finish this out. You're not going to want to miss it. But thank you for being here. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for your goodness to us. We know this, Lord, that heart talks are what you want us to have with you. Lord, where we share our emotions and our hearts with you, and you hear and you know and you have experienced so much of what we're going through. Lord, you are our creator, and you know everything about us. Lord, there is no mystery, there is no hidden thing that you do not know. And Lord, I know this, that when we come to you and we are broken and we are humble, Lord, you show up and you reveal yourself to us. And Father, through your word, you are so clear and so plain. And Lord, I just pray that as we have relationships with one another here on earth, that we would emulate the relationship that you have in the Trinity, as well as how you have a relationship with us. Father, help us to never forget that this relationship is all about bringing you glory. It was designed by you, and for your glory and for your purpose, and not for our own selfish desires and our own selfish purposes. And so, Lord, when we understand that, Lord, clarity creeps in, Lord, just maturity grows in our own hearts and lives. So give us that in Jesus' precious name. Amen and amen. Well, we'll see you guys on Sunday. We're starting this series on That's My Jam. It'll be, like I said, a year ago, I did a whole thing on what men need to do to be men, and I'm going to do something different, and I'm going to talk about women, which is going to be difficult. My wife's been giving me lots of hints on what not to say. So I'll see you on Sunday.
I can't control, though, what you end up saying.
And hopefully I won't say anything stupid. Have a great day. We'll see you on Sunday.